So in the Office of ODI, we're working on rolling out some training opportunities that we hope you'll take advantage of. One of which is a training called Tolerance is Not Enough. And not to give away the punchline or circumvent our conversation, I do want you to think about what that word tolerance means. And for most of us, we recognize that tolerance means to put up with. Until when? Until we no longer have to. I'm sure you've had a house guest that may have stayed a little too long, but you could tolerate them because you knew at some point it would end, right? So tolerance is not enough. And so when we talk about this idea of tolerance, is it possible that there could be something beyond tolerance that we could be working towards? Is there something beyond just tolerating that house guest that compels you to tolerate them, right? So we'll talk about that. So tolerance is not enough. That's roughly about a 45-minute to a 2-hour session. So it depends on how you want to use it, but we have that session coming soon. So we have a tool that we'll be rolling out that is based on the climate survey that was done here at Mayo. And one of the things that we found in that climate assessment was that people were very concerned about their own unconscious bias. And so this particular learning session is a brain-based approach supported with research and data to help us understand our own unconscious bias. Right? So we know what a conscious bias is. It's that way of interacting that is very prevalent. Like, we have resistance to working with or seeing or operating with difference. This is the unconscious way in which we not only gain these biases, but how those biases are acted out and how we can take cognitive control over those unconscious bias. So look for that session coming out soon. And then lastly is this idea of stereotype threat. And stereotype threat is simply that there are stereotypes in our groups, and we can be stimulated to either fall into or be reminded of those stereotypes. And that can impact our performance. I think it's very similar, or a methodology that I use to think about this idea of stereotype threat is looking at professional athletes. Now, I will tell you that anytime we use a metaphor, there are some limits to that metaphor, so you can only carry it so far. But oftentimes, what we recognize about athletes is that they have done their craft repetitively. They could, for many of them, could do it in their sleep without any thought to it. But every so often, there are environmental factors that come into play into their psyche that actually limits them based on the triggers that are happening in that environment. We know that athletes go through their practice, their craft, probably hundreds or thousands of times in practice, rehearsals, and in games. But there are also these systemic things that happen that trigger some self-doubt, some worry, some concern that they have, and it causes them to not perform at their best. We refer to that as choking, right? So big games, high stakes performance, oftentimes there's a mental construct that is challenged that folks don't do well in because of that mental challenge.